I'm sitting here with Mr. Tom Petty. That was amazing. Thank you for coming here and doing it.
Well, my pleasure.
Tom Petty was a rock and roll legend who had a remarkable ability to capture hearts, whether with the Heartbreakers or through his hits with the Traveling Wilburys. His success was undeniable, standing apart from the often uninspiring trend of synthetic, computerized music. Unlike some artists, Petty put his heart and soul into everything he did. Yet, there were aspects of his life that remained hidden from the world, particularly his health struggles. His death was a devastating shock to fans, but what followed was the revelation of a startling truth. But the Beatles, you know, looked like something that could be done to me. These people look like they self-contained. They're making music that they wrote themselves. So join us as we explore what Tom Petty's autopsy revealed about his death. The beginning of Tom's journey. Tom Petty, born on October 20, 1950, in Gainesville, Florida, was the eldest of two sons in his family. His mom, Kitty Petty, worked at a local tax office, while his dad, Earl Petty, was often on the road as a salesman. Tom's younger brother, Bruce, came along 7 years later. Growing up in the Duck Pond area of northeast Gainesville, Tom spent his childhood in a neighborhood that would one day honor him with a historical marker in a park named Tom Petty Park. As a kid, he attended Howard Bishop Middle School, where he dabbled in Little League baseball and basketball before moving on to Gainesville High School, graduating in 1968. In his youth, Tom took on various odd jobs. He worked briefly on the grounds crew at the University of Florida, though he never attended the university as a student. There's even a lime tree on campus known as the Tom Petty tree, which he supposedly planted, though Tom didn't recall ever planting any trees there. Another interesting job he held was as a Grand W digger, a detail that adds a quirky twist to his early life story. A love affair with rock and roll. At the age of 10, Tom started to get acquainted with rock and roll. It all began one summer in 1961, when his uncle was working on the set of one of Elvis Presley's movies titled Follow That Dream. They were shooting in nearby Ocala, and he invited Tom to watch the shooting. This was the first time that he met Elvis, and soon he was an Elvis fanatic. He even ended up trading his WHA slingshot for Elvis records. Years later, in an interview in 2006, Tom was asked about how he concluded wanting to be in a band, and his response was by watching The Beatles on The Ed Sullivan Show. As with any other young man of his age, that outstanding show was an inspiration. Tom came to the understanding that making a band with friends, creating music and having fun was something he wanted to do. He did not have a passion for sports, but he had a clear vision for himself in music due to his passion for Elvis and the inspiration he had gotten from the Beatles. Gainesville was teeming with aspiring musicians, so before long, garage bands were sprouting like weeds. Tom was no exception. He later attributed his love for the Rolling Stones to teaching him that normal guys like him could become rock and roll stars. Don Felder, one of the earliest people Tom worked with, would later join the Eagles. In Felder's autobiography, he mentioned that he was among the first people to teach Tom how to play the guitar. Tom, however, had a different memory of this, and recalled that it was Felder who once taught him how to play the piano. His time with the Heartbreakers. Shortly after Petty decided he wanted to be a musician, he formed a band called the Epics, which would evolve into Mudcrutch. This group included future Heartbreakers Mike Campbell and Benmont Tench. While they were quite famous in Gainesville, their songs never received much attention from the rest of the country. As Mudcrutch failed to make the intended album, it disbanded, and Petty felt reluctant, but he gave a solo try. Tench began to form his own band, which Petty found rather amusing. Later, Petty gathered Campbell, Tench, Ron Blair, and Stan Lynch to form the Heartbreakers. Their first album received a poor reception in the US, but the British audience was more welcoming. Their second album, You're Going to Get It, entered the top 40 for the first time with hits like I Need to Know and Listen to Her Heart. However, they became popular for their third album, Damn the Torpedoes. The fourth album, titled Hard Promises, also came out in 1981 and was a platinum hit with hit singles like The Waiting. Insider was the first song on which Petty recorded a duet with Stevie Nicks. Blair left the group, so Ho Epstein replaced him. In the fifth album, Long After Dark, in 1982, the album also contained the song You Got Lucky. The band retained this formation until 1994. A year later, the band was involved in Live Aid, where the group performed 4 songs at the JFK Stadium in Philadelphia before 90,000 people. Between 1986 and 1987, they played a few dates with the Grateful Dead. In 1987, they released Let Me Up, I've Had Enough, featuring Jammin' Me, which Petty co-wrote with Dylan. The era of the Traveling Wilburys. Some of the most brilliant musicians of the time, which included Bob Dylan, George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Roy Orbison, and Tom Petty, decided to get together and form a band. They just jammed, creating music that could blow away the world. This group of musicians was called the Traveling Wilburys, and it will always go down in history as the best rock subgroup with British-American roots. In 1988 to 1991, Bob Dylan was born Robert Allen Zimmerman on May 24, 1941, in St. Louis County, Minnesota, and he was among the most influential singer-songwriters of the folk genre in the United States of America. He has been actively working for the last 60 years, which is simply incredible. It was actually in the 1960s when Dylan began to storm the charts with creations such as The Times They Are A-Changin', which quickly became the music of the civil rights and anti-war movements. He elevated refined, suggestive themes of literature to folk and simplified the raunchy blues of Johnny Johnson to country. The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan was the rock and roll album that Bob Dylan introduced in 1963, and it comprised famous songs such as Blowin' in the Wind. 2 more albums that he released in 1964 were The Times They Are A-Changin' and Another Side of Bob Dylan. In 1965 to 66, some complaints rose against him concerning the shift of songs like a Rolling Stone toward pop. So in 1966, right after the motorcycle accident that left him in bad shape, Dylan started recording with the band on what has become known as the Basement Tapes. He followed up that interest with the John Wesley Harding album and Nashville Skyline album that followed in the late 1960s and 1970s. Then, in the later 70s, he converted to born-again Christianity, so albums of gospel followed, and later he returned to rock and roll in the 80s. The album Time Out of Mind in 1997 was a return to form, and the next critically acclaimed albums, the latest being Rough and Rowdy Ways, which came out in 2020. Then there was George Harrison. Born on the 25th of February 1943 in England, he automatically became the lead guitarist of the most influential group of all time, the Beatles, popularly dubbed as the Invisible Beatle. Harrison contributed a lot to the sound of the group and helped them unlock themselves to the spirit of the Indian raga. Almost all the music was composed by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. However, starting from 1965, George also wrote many songs such as Taxman and Here Comes the Sun. His early influences were musicians such as George Formby and Django Reinhardt, while in his later years, he was influenced by names like Carl Perkins, Chet Atkins, and Chuck Berry. By 1965, he was leading the Beatles into folk rock, similar to Bob Dylan and the Byrds, with the use of the Indian classical music heard in sitar in Norwegian wood. On the other hand, Jeff Lynne was born on the 30th of December 1947 in Birmingham, and he formed the ELO in 1970. ELO went on to become the second most successful band after the Beatles, with hits like Mr. Blue Sky and Don't Bring Me Down. ELO was disbanded in 1986, and after that, Lynne continued his solo activity and co-founded the Traveling Wilbury Band. He also worked with many artists and reformed ELO in 2014, and continues to perform and record music to this day. Lynne was equally recognized for his contributions to music and received stars on the Birmingham Walk of Stars and the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He became a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of ELO in 2017 and was awarded an OBE in 2020. Finally, there was Roy Orbison, a singer who sang some of the most emotional rock ballads of all time. Texas-born Roy Orbison, naturally known for his powerful voice and depressive songs, took the stages when the world needed it most early in the 1960s. Greats such as "Oh Pretty Woman" and "Crying" made him a legend. Despite personal tragedies and a career slump, Orbison enjoyed a resurgence in the 1980s, culminating in his role in the Traveling Wilburys. His sudden death in 1988 at the age of 52 was a huge loss, but his legacy lived on through posthumous releases and accolades. Orbison's honors include inductions into multiple halls of fame and a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Rolling Stone ranked him number 37 on their list of the greatest artists of all time and number 13 on their list of the greatest singers. His influence remains profound, with his music continuing to touch hearts worldwide. The journey of the Traveling Wilburys began from a jolly thought when Harrison was recording his album in 1987, known as Cloud 9. Harrison and Lynn were in the process of thinking, and both of them had a feeling it would be great to gather friends for a song. So in April 1988, they did just that and intended to record a bonus track for one of Harrison's singles. The fruit of the collaboration was the song "Handle with Care," which was so strong that they could not simply release it as the B-side. They chose to record an entire album, which led to Traveling Wilburys Volume 1. The Traveling Wilburys were named and created by George Harrison of the Beatles. He first touched on them back in a 1988 interview where he was discussing his desire to make music with his friends. Harrison and Lynn thought about having a band when working on the Cloud 9 song and invited Dylan and Orbison. The name Wilbury was inspired by the fact that recording mistakes could be buried with the alibi that they were recorded at Wilbury. First, Harrison had proposed the name the Trembling Wilburys, but Lynn was able to work on it and give it a better name, Traveling Wilburys. Harrison and Lynn's relationship with Tom Petty got to a new level in 1987 when Petty's band went to Europe with Dylan. The friendship was taken further in Los Angeles where, after Harrison had discovered that Petty was a fan of 1950s rock and roll, the two began listening to each other's music at the very same time. Lynn was working with Orbison on the album, which became his final recording titled Mystery Girl. The official formation of the Wilburys happened in April 1988. Harrison was in LA for a film project and needed a new B-side for his single, This Is Love. Over a meal, he asked Lynn and Orbison to help record the track, which led them to Dylan's garage studio. Petty joined the fun when Harrison went to pick up his guitar from Petty's place and extended the invite. The group ended up recording Handle with Care and realized they had something special, leading to the formation of the Traveling Wilburys. The debut album was recorded in just 10 days in May 1988 at Eurythmics member Dave Stewart's house. The musicians sat in a circle in the kitchen, strumming their acoustic guitars, and later recorded their vocals in another room. Petty remembered how they had to clear the air with Dylan on the first day, telling him they treat him like one of the guys, to which Dylan responded, "Great, I'm in awe of you guys too." Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 was a triumph filled with catchy tunes and a playful spirit. The album's success revitalized Dylan, Orbison, and Petty's careers, and defied the era's musical trends like hip-hop and synthesized pop. Critics and fans loved it, and it even won a Grammy. The album's packaging included whimsical liner notes written by Monty Python's Michael Palin under a pseudonym. Sadly, Roy Orbison passed away in December 1988, just as the band was riding high. In tribute, the music video for their second single, End of the Line, featured a rocking chair with Orbison's guitar and a framed photo of him. The band decided not to replace Orbison and continued as a four. They recorded Traveling Wilburys Volume 3 in March 1990, a rougher, more raucous album than its predecessor, with Dylan taking on a more prominent vocal role. The second album didn't reach the heights of their debut, but it still had its charm. The band members maintained their playful pseudonyms and even included a dedication to Orbison as Lefty Wilbury. The album's promotional video for Wilbury Twist featured comedic actors like John Candy and Eric Idle trying to master the song's dance style. Post-Wilburys, the members went back to their solo careers, with Harrison being the most vocal about potentially reuniting, though they never toured as the Traveling Wilburys. Harrison often imagined how it might play out, blending solo sets with Wilburys' tunes. Petty thought it could work, but worried it might spoil the group's informal, carefree spirit. Exploring a solo career, in 1989, Petty released Full Moon Fever, which featured hits like I Won't Back Down, Free Fallin', and Running Down a Dream. Though it was his first solo album in name, it included contributions from several Heartbreakers and other notable musicians. Mike Campbell co-produced it with Petty and Jeff Lynne, with appearances by Roy Orbison and George Harrison. Ringo Starr appeared in the video for I Won't Back Down, but the drums were played by Phil Jones. Petty and the Heartbreakers regrouped in 1991 to release Into the Great Wide Open, co-produced by Lynne and featuring hit singles like Learning to Fly and Into the Great Wide Open, with a memorable music video starring Johnny Depp and Faye Dunaway. Before parting ways with MCA Records, Petty and the Heartbreakers recorded 2 new songs live in the studio for a greatest hits collection, Mary Jane's Last Dance and Something in the Air. These were Stan Lynch's last recordings with the Heartbreakers, as he left shortly after the sessions without much of a goodbye. The Greatest Hits package went on to sell over 10 million copies, earning diamond certification from the RIAA. Tom's Warner Brothers era. In 1989, early in his career and during his Warner Brothers contract with MCA, Tom Petty pulled a smart move. He finally inked a suite for Warner Brothers Records, home to the Traveling Wilburys, during that time. And moving to the year 1994, Petty released his first album with Warner Brothers entitled Wildflowers. This was no ordinary album. It was Tom Petty's second solo project, containing popular tracks like the namesake You Don't Know How It Feels, You Wreck Me, It's Good to Be King, and A Higher Place. The album was produced by Rick Rubin and quickly became a commercial success, selling more than 3 million copies in the United States. Skip forward to 1996, and Petty is back once again with his backing band The Heartbreakers, and an album for the movie She's the One, starring Cameron Diaz and Jennifer Aniston. The pounding was accompanied by some good songs such as Walls, Climb That Hill, and a song by Lucinda Williams, Change the Locks. That same year, the band teamed up with Johnny Cash on his album Unchained, a collaboration whimsically dubbed Petty Cash. This project earned Cash a Grammy for Best Country Album, and he later returned the favor by covering Petty's I Won't Back Down on his album American 3. The second film is Solitary Man by 1999. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers released Echko, which is their final project that Rubin oversees as a producer. This album was no slouch, hitting number 10 on the US album charts and featuring singles like Room at the Top and Free Girl Now. In the wake of the September 11th attacks, Petty and the Heartbreakers took the stage at the America, a tribute to Heroes benefit concert when performing I Won't Back Down and showing the unity of people. The following year, they pay tribute to their friend and bandmate George Harrison at the Concert for George and played Taxman, I Need You, and Handle with Care, with some help from Jeff Lynne, Donnie Harrison, and Jim Keltner. By 2002, Petty was prepared to make his stand against the music industry, or more accurately, the ravages of time, with his album titled The Last DJ. This record was a strong condemnation of various practices within this industry. While the title track was informed by LA-based radio presenter Jim Ladd, The song complained about radio DJs being unable to choose what to play, and that put a lot of aches across the country. Getting to number 9 on the Billboard 200 inspired by this, XM Radio was launched in 2005, whereby Petty joined to host the show called Buried Treasure. People always enjoyed listening to Petty's favorite songs from his records, and that is why it turned out to be quite popular. Next, in 2006, Petty and the Heartbreakers became main stage headliners at the 5th Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival as a part of their 30th anniversary tour. This was not a usual touring event. The band invited other talented musicians including Stevie Nicks, Pearl Jam, the Allman Brothers Band, Trey Anastasio, Derek Trucks Band, and the Black Crowes. They even sang together when Petty joined Nicks on stage for several songs, including the hit tune Stop Dragging My Heart Around. In July 2006, Petty announced that he'd release a solo album titled Highway Companion. It took off as soon as it was released, and one of its tracks, Saving Grace, was one of the band's best songs. Tom Petty's album stormed the charts, peaking at the 4th position on the Billboard 200, which was the highest position that the singer-songwriter had ever achieved at that time, with a new album since 1991. As a touch more attention, Petty involved such songs as Square One, Down South, and Flirting with Time in the tour with Heartbreakers in 1988. When it was the summer of 2007, Petty was reminiscing a bit. Partial reproduction of the cover from Drive Magnet CD by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. He reunited with Tom Lenn and Randall Marsh, and from the Heartbreakers with Benmont Tench and Mike Campbell, to resurrect his first group after the Heartbreakers named Mudcrutch. This was not done in just the group released a new album containing 14 new songs to the public on the 29th of April 2008. They also provided a bonus track, Sweetest Goodbye Special Place, if people pre-ordered it on iTunes. Finally, to sweeten things up, Mudcrutch was gearing up for a brief tour in California that spring. In the same year, Petty and the Heartbreakers contributed a cover of I'm Walkin' to the album Goin' Home, a tribute to Fats Domino. It helped purchase musical instruments for students of New Orleans public schools and constructed a community center in 9th Ward, which was greatly impacted by Katrina. Next was the much-anticipated Super Bowl X-Salto halftime show on the 3rd of February in 2008. The Heartbreakers supported Petty with American Girl, I Won't Back Down, Free Fallin', and Running Down a Dream at the University of Phoenix Stadium. That summer, they toured North America with Steve Winwood as an opener, who also came on stage to perform Give Me Some Lovin' with Petty and for Can't Find My Way Home. In November 2009, the band introduced the Live Anthology, a set of live recordings from the periods between 1978 to 2006. The next album by Petty and the Heartbreakers was released in June 2010, Mojo, marking the band's 12th album in total. Petty himself called it blues-based, and a few songs in the album were longer and more improvisational than others. He said that some songs were Allman Brothers, albeit not in terms of the song's tune, but in the song's concept of the band. To properly introduce Mojo, they debuted the band on May 17, 2010, on Saturday Night Live. After this, they released a new album, and they went for a summer tour in North America. However, just before the tour, disaster struck. The band's practice space in Culver City, California was robbed, and 5 guitars, including 2 of Petty's, were stolen. Thankfully, Los Angeles police managed to recover the instruments within a week. The Heartbreakers began a world tour in 2012, including the first EU shows in 20 years, as well as the first ever in the Canadian provinces of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador. Petty and his Heartbreakers came back with their next studio album, their 13th album, titled Hypnotic Eye, on the 28th of July, 2014. This was a big album for the band. It came out that same year and sold enough copies to reach the #1 spot on the Billboard 200 chart, which was the first time the band had done that. Later, in November 2015, the Tom Petty Radio was established on Sirius XM, providing the dedicated channel specialized in Petty's music and other related content. Heartbreakers celebrated their 40th anniversary tour in 2017, which was conducted all across the United States. It began in Oklahoma City on April 20th and ended in the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles on September 25th, and the extent to which it was successful in achieving that goal is informed by the following text. Every performer gave us a memorable last scene, with the final act being a rendition of American Girl. However, the journey did not stop there. Another compilation album titled An American Treasure was released in memorial of Petty, when Reprise Records released it on September 28, 2018, consisting of 60 tracks from Petty's career. This collection contains songs that were previously only found on singles, different versions or remixes of known and favorite tracks, bides, live material, and everything one would consider a hidden gem. The first single, which was released on the 27th of July 2018, was Keep a Little Soul, an unissued track recorded during the 1982 sessions of the album Long After Dark. Tom and his dabbling in film. Tom Petty was no stranger to the silver screen. His first taste in a film came in 1978 with a cameo in FM. Later, in 1987, he snagged a small part in Made in Heaven. Around the same time, he appeared on It's Garry Shandling's show, popping up in several episodes between 1987 and 1990 as himself, one of Gary's quirky neighbors. Petty also made an appearance on The Larry Sanders Show, where he played himself again in a memorable scene that saw him nearly getting into a tussle with Greg Kinnear after being bumped from the show. In 1997, Petty took on a different kind of role in The Postman, directed by and starring Kevin Costner. He played the mayor of Bridge City, a character who seemed like a future version of himself. Fast forward to 2002, and Petty was animated into the world of The Simpsons in the episode How I Spent My Strummer Vacation. He, alongside rock legends like Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, taught Homer Simpson the finer points of lyric writing, even crafting a song about a drunk girl driving while worrying about public schools. And in true Simpsons fashion, he ended up losing a toe during a riot. From 2004 to 2009, Petty lent his voice to the character Lucky, Elroy Krebs, Schmidt, in the animated series King of the Hill. Then, in 2010, he made a brief but memorable cameo with comedian Andy Samberg in the music video Great Day, from the Lonely Island's album Turtleneck and Chain. Standing up for creative freedom. With regards to his music, Petty was very defensive, especially to anyone seeking to mess with his creativity. In 1979, ABC Records was sold to MCA, and Petty refused to be relocated personally. This led to a legal dispute, and in May 1979, he sought relief by declaring bankruptcy to avoid the label transfer, which was signed with MCA's new subsidiary, Backstreet Records. Later in 1981, a lot of issues were made about Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' upcoming album Hard Promises. The management of MCA sought to price it at $9.98. For this price, which is $1 more than the standard price of the item, the user was guaranteed a delivery within a week. Petty wasn't having it, and he took to the media to protest against it, which became a yardstick of sorts among the show's fans. The battle was resolved finally by the complete surrender of MCA, which was unable to drive down the price below $8.98. Petty was also not shy of defending his music in any way he could. In 1987, he sued B.F. Goodrich for $1 million for a commercial that included a song that resembled Mary's New Car. The ad agency had earlier sent requests to the copyright owners for a right to use the song, but they were declined. The board banned the advertisement immediately, and a restraining order was given by a judge to stop the ad from further aggravating the situation, which was solved with an out-of-court settlement. Petty was just as forceful regarding the political application of his songs. He denied George W. Bush the right to use "I Won't Back Down" in his campaign in the year 2000. In 2020, the Trump family stated that Petty would never want his music played in a campaign of hate. Not surprisingly, there were some rumors that the Red Hot Chili Peppers song "Danny California" closely resembled Petty's "Mary Jane's Last Dance." But Petty did not get angry. He spoke to Rolling Stone and stated that rock songs are pretty similar most of the time, and he could not get mad if there was no spite. He even chuckled when the Strokes admitted they lifted the riff for "Last Night" from his American Girl. In January 2015, another song controversy arose with Sam Smith's hit "Stay With Me," which bore similarities to Petty's "I Won't Back Down." Smith's team acknowledged the likeness, and Petty and Jeff Lynne were awarded 12.5% of the royalties. Petty handled it graciously, saying he didn't think Smith plagiarized him intentionally. It was just one of those things that happened in songwriting, and he appreciated how Smith's team dealt with the situation. A challenging life. Tom Petty's life was a mix of triumphs and trials, starting with a challenging relationship with his father. Petty often spoke about how his father had a hard time accepting his gentle nature and artistic interests, leading to frequent verbal and physical abuse. He once described his dad as a wild, gambling drinker guy, which pretty much sums up the chaos he grew up with. Despite this, Petty shared a close bond with his mother and his brother Bruce. In 1974, Petty married Jane Benyo, and together they had two daughters, Adria, who pursued a career as a director, and Anna Kim, who became an artist. Interestingly, Stevie Nicks got the title for her famous song "Edge of 17" from a misheard conversation with Benyo, who had mentioned meeting Petty when she was 17. Unfortunately, Petty and Benyo's marriage ended in divorce in 1996. Life threw another curveball at Petty on May 17, 1987, when an arsonist set his house in Encino, California, on fire. Firefighters managed to save his basement recording studio and the precious original tape stored there, along with his cherished Gibson Dove acoustic guitar. However, his iconic gray top hat didn't survive the blaze, and the culprit was never found. The emotional aftermath of his divorce led Petty into a battle with heroin addiction. He later revealed that the pain of the split drove him to substance abuse, but by 1999, with the help of his then-girlfriend Dana York, he sought treatment and got clean. Dana's support was crucial, and Petty often credited her with saving his life. Their relationship grew stronger, and on June 3, 2001, Petty and York tied the knot in Las Vegas. They held a second ceremony at their Malibu home on June 21st, officiated by none other than Little Richard, with an all-female mariachi band providing the music. Dana brought a son from her previous marriage named Dylan into their family. Petty found solid and balance through transcendental meditation, a practice he spoke highly of in 2014, noting the benefits it brought to his life. Tom's tragic death. It was a tragic day when, on the 1st of October in the year 2017, Dana woke up only to find Petty unresponsive and having a cardiac arrest at their home. He was immediately transferred to the UCLA Medical Center in Santa Monica, California, and put on a ventilator. Petty was pronounced dead at 8:04 p.m. PDT on October 2nd, though efforts were made to save his life on that day. People heard the news of Mo's death, but it was far from the truth, and fans who were followers and admirers of Mo were thrown into a lot of sorrow by the rumor that was spread around. The memorial service was conducted on October 16, 2017, at the Self-Realization Fellowship Lake Shrine in Pacific Palisades, Los Angeles, and this was only 4 days to his 67th birthday. Petty's wife Dana appeared in an interview with Billboard on September 8, 2018, telling more about how Petty had postponed the hip surgery his doctors had suggested. He felt a strong sense of duty to his longtime crew and fans, wanting to complete what he believed would be his final tour. Dana mentioned that Petty was in high spirits the day before he died, having recently completed 3 shows in Los Angeles, and feeling immensely proud and excited about the future. His sudden passing, therefore, was all the more heartbreaking. The revelation of the autopsy report. The sudden death of Tom Petty shocked many of his fans and his closest ones. However, a year later, in 2018, it was revealed that he died from an accidental drug overdose. Sadly, on the same day he learned his hip was fractured, Dana, his wife, and Adria, his daughter, disclosed Petty's autopsy through his Facebook account. This announcement was made right before the official report came from the Los Angeles coroner's office, along with the full autopsy report. They admitted that the overdose was due to the consumption of multiple medicinal drugs at various times. At the coroner's inquest, it was revealed that Petty had a mixture of prescription painkillers, sedatives, and an antidepressant in his system. These medications included powerful opiates, such as fentanyl and oxycodone. It is important to note that fentanyl also killed Prince in April 2016 in a supposed accident. Petty had been suffering from emphysema, a fractured hip, and knee problems, which caused him significant pain. Nevertheless, he remained dedicated to touring. He had wrapped up a tour just days before his death in October, at the age of 66. On the day he died, Petty learned that his hip fracture had worsened to a full break. His family believes the unbearable pain led him to overuse his medication. Remarkably, he had performed over 50 concerts with a fractured hip, showcasing his commitment and resilience. The family expressed their confidence in the coroner's finding that Petty's death was an unfortunate accident. They acknowledged that Petty had been prescribed various pain medications, including fentanyl patches, to manage his numerous health issues. In their statement, the family recognized that this report might ignite further discussions on the opioid crisis. They emphasized the importance of this conversation, hoping that it might save lives. They noted that many people who overdose start with a legitimate injury or are unaware of the lethal potency of these medications. A long list of awards. In 1994, a tribute album was released in what was a special homage to Tom Petty, and even bands like Everclear and Silkworm put their stamp on the songs. The song was named "You Got Lucky." Jump forward to April 1996. A very proud Petty was accepting more award gold at UCLA, and this time it was the George and Ira Gershwin Award for Lifetime Musical Achievement. But the recognition did not end here. Less than a month after that, he received the Golden Note Award from the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. By the close of the year 1999, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers rightly deserved a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which depicted the band's influences on the recording industry. Another high point arrived in the year 2001, when Petty and his group were honored as members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. As for the Hall of Fame, it reserved an exhibit of his memorabilia from July 2006 through 2007. The Rolling Stone magazine listed Petty as the 91st greatest artist of all time, a position that speaks volumes of his impact. A month before being bestowed with the prestigious honor, he was awarded the Billboard Century Award in December 2005, which crowned his creativity. Then, Gainesville, Florida, which is Petty's and the musician's origin city, rewarded them with the Key of the City in September 2006. The next year, at the New York Film Festival, a big documentary by Peter Bogdanovich titled Running Down a Dream, which was entirely dedicated to Petty, was released. Petty got the prestigious MusiCares Person of the Year in February 2017 for both his music and philanthropy. Unfortunately, after Gainesville killed the man in 2017, 1 week after his murder, Gainesville painted a mural at the Southwest 34th Street wall that read, "Love you always, Gainesville, #1 son." Thanks, Tommy. In celebrating what would have been Petty's 68th birthday in October 2018, Gainesville officially changed the name of Northeast Park to Tom Petty Park, an area where he grew up. In December, the University of Florida, his alma mater, granted him the honors of a PhD posthumous Lee in his discography, 3 records out of his productions, namely Wildflowers, Damn the Torpedoes, and Full Moon Fever, featured in Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time. American Girl, as well as Free Fallin', were recognized on the list of the 500 Greatest Songs of All Time by Rolling Stone magazine. A University of Florida music band known as the Pride of the Sunshine Band designated their halftime in October 2022 to Petty's music as a result of the Tom Petty Day, which was the first of its kind and further extended into the remainder of the football season. Subsequently, in December 2023, Petty's song Love is a Long Road was included in the much-awaited trailer for the game Grand Theft Auto 6. This specific trailer received a lot of attention and currently has received over 90 million viewers on YouTube in one day only. The song itself substantially increased listens and searches, booming to second place on the iTunes chart worldwide. And just like that, Tom Petty's legacy lives on to this day.